The original release of Resident Evil 2 was the first in the series that I had played, and it's always stuck with me as a favorite. As such, it's admittedly going to be difficult for me not to come off as biased, but I'm going to do my best to look at this as objectively as I can. As much as I love this game, there are definitely a few issues that I'm not entirely happy with.
What have we got here?
The story begins with Leon S. Kennedy and Claire Redfield unwittingly finding themselves in the middle of a zombie-infested city.
Look, I'm sorry I bothered you, okay?
Before they realize it, they're in too deep to easily escape and have to fight their way through the zombie horde and other monstrosities, along the way uncovering the truth behind the outbreak. Much like the first game, Resident Evil 2's story is supplemented by fully voiced cutscenes, both real-time and pre-rendered, as well as text documents throughout the game that help flesh out the backstory and lore. It does a great job at seamlessly and directly telling the player a story both in the present and in the past. Since the documents are mostly optional and can be read at any time after they've been collected, it helps a lot with the pacing of the game. But they shouldn't be entirely ignored, as many of them contain helpful clues, or just straight up answers to some of the puzzles. While the cutscenes can certainly drag on for a bit, the acting is well done and it's all enjoyable to watch. It's a complete 180 in comparison to the horrendous voice acting from the first game.
Oh, Jill, this house is dangerous. There are terrible demons. Ouch!
You're wounded. What kind of demon attacked you?
For a game released in 1998, the graphics of Resident Evil 2 hold up pretty well. I mean, yeah, the character models are awfully pixelated and the backgrounds are a bit of a blurry mess, but everything else is still clearly defined for the most part. You can tell when a character is angry or annoyed, and while most of it has to do with the voice acting, the animations help out a lot as well.
What was that all about? Running off like that was reckless and stupid. Those zombies are everywhere, not to mention that thing that got Ben.
I was there, Leon. I know.
It's a little overacted and very campy at times, but I like it. Little details like trash piling up in a corner, taxidermy animals, and boarded up windows all go a long way towards breathing life into every room. Even if all of these elements aren't really necessary, they do help the player immerse themselves in the world and effectively make the game a more memorable experience. This is reinforced by the great soundtrack, which stays subtle and in the background while you're blasting away at zombies. That is, until it's really needed for the boss battles. The save room theme acts as a nice reprieve from the horrors of Raccoon City. While the rest of the music evokes dark and melodic tones. It's good, it sets the mood, and it's cool to listen to just on its own. While the presentation is certainly on point, the gameplay is a bit awkward. Definitely a love it or hate it sort of thing. And while I absolutely love it, I can see a lot of people not standing for it. Resident Evil 2 has the infamous tank controls and fixed camera perspective. Pushing up on the D-pad will move the character forwards in relation to the direction they are looking in, rather than in relation to the camera. Furthermore, the camera will have abrupt cuts after approaching the edge of the screen, which can lead to unwittingly running into zombies. This turns the game into a bit of a dance between running on screen and walking off screen. It's weird and can take some getting used to, but it's not bad at all. The fixed camera angles do offer some interesting viewpoints and add a lot of mystery to the game, like this part with blood dripping from the ceiling. And of course, there's that famous scene where a monster quickly climbs across a window. Furthermore, the pre-rendered backgrounds approach is a look that's pretty unique to this era of video games. And despite the low resolution, I think it's held up quite well. The tank controls go hand in hand with the fixed camera angles. It's tough to have one without the other. I'm sure that more people hate tank controls than like them, but I think they work out really well and the stiff controls do add to the horror atmosphere. The gameplay is divided into 3 areas of focus: combat, exploration, and puzzles. Combat is handled with equipping a weapon, making sure you have the appropriate ammo for it, and then firing away. A weapon can only be aimed in 3 strict directions, either straight ahead or up and down at 45-degree angles. The shotgun is something of a special case for being able to specifically aim for the head, but most weapons are better off firing either straight ahead or downwards. This makes direct combat very simple. The game tries to mix things up with faster enemies and monsters with projectile attacks, but there's no getting around the fact that combat basically boils down to using the right weapon at the right time, and otherwise just standing your ground and firing away. Except for the boss battles, in which case you employ hit and run tactics. The different rooms are sometimes arranged for the player to figure out the best possible approach, trying to have a strategical take on the combat. However, more often than not, the game typically lines up zombies in a linear fashion down a hallway, or spreads them out so much that they're easily avoided. That is, when the game isn't unfairly thrusting you into a room jam-packed with zombies right at the door. A big part of exploration, aside from opening new doors, comes down to running along a wall and mashing the X button. I know that it's an older video game thing, but it's something that I have never liked, even when these games were still new. Final Fantasy IX came out way too late with its feature of highlighting items in the environment. While the flavor text for stuff in the background is cool, it's not fun to search incessantly in hopes of finding something. And the locations for some of these item pickups are in some really mean spots. Like behind this statue, or behind this desk. Locations you'd logically never think to look other than, well, maybe the developer put something there. I'll concede to some of the spots, like finding a first aid spray when searching a medical bag. But other locations I'm not entirely happy with. This is compounded by the game making you think that supplies are very limited and need to be used conservatively, when in reality, there's enough ammo in the game to kill everything twice over and plenty of healing items to spare. Not to mention that the game is surprisingly short. By the time you realize that the finale is upon you, you still have a ton of supplies that you haven't used. On the other hand, a big part of the fun with Resident Evil games is struggling through that initial playthrough. You won't know when it's the right time to take stronger weapons with you, or when you'll need particular items to solve puzzles. It sounds weird to say, but I feel like in this case that's part of the fun of exploring and discovering new things. However, it does end up being a lot of running around with no clue where to go. Since the game is short, it's pretty easy to jump back in and complete it in about 2 hours for whenever you're in the mood. And there's something really satisfying about creating a route through this game and trying to figure out the fastest way to complete it. But obviously, that's not going to appeal to everyone. As for the puzzles, there's not a whole lot to say. They are very simple, and are more like temporary roadblocks than anything else. The solutions are either obvious at a glance, or just straight up spelled out for you. I would imagine that the greater difficulty is in accidentally passing by an item. For example, the C4 is in this drawer back here, but it's easy to miss unless you're mashing X on all the background elements. And man, not knowing where a key item is in this game can be a nightmare. The police station isn't too huge once you have your bearings, but searching every room because you're not sure where something is can really suck. Thankfully, I've never had this issue, and I don't know anyone who has either, but I get the feeling that this could definitely be a problem. So I know that I trashed on this game quite a bit, and I'm actually having a hard time finding enough merit to give this game a proper recommendation for most people. I think a big part of it has to do with how well done the presentation is, and the game does a good job at making you feel like you're overcoming impossible odds. It's hard to explain, but something about it just keeps me coming back for more. And the game really isn't that bad once you've mastered the controls and have a greater understanding of how to get through the game. Normally that would really upset me since that kinda translates to, oh, it gets better at X hours in, but since the game is so short, it's not that big of a deal to me to recommend this to people. It's also worth mentioning Resident Evil 2's replay value and the variety of scenarios that it offers. Both Leon and Claire have their own separate campaigns, however after completing one you will then unlock the B scenario for the other character, which is basically replaying the game again with some new and altered elements. This equates to a total of 4 scenarios for the main game, Leon A and then Claire B, as well as Claire A and then Leon B. There's also an unlockable campaign known as the 4th Survivor, which is extremely short as it can be completed in well under 10 minutes, but also incredibly difficult and will likely take hours of attempts. Lastly, there's the Extreme Battle campaign, in which multiple characters with unique loadouts can be selected as they tackle another unique scenario. All of this is great, but keep in mind that every one of these campaigns reuses a ton of content between them. Even completing the basic A-B scenario in order to see the true ending has the player retreading a lot of familiar ground. Enough of it is different where I would recommend trying all the scenarios, but it does feel like a huge collection of arrange modes, which is hilarious considering that there is also a dedicated arrange mode as well. Unfortunately, it seems to be a completely worthless addition in this version of the game. Only the rookie difficulty is available, which starts the player off with a machine gun that has unlimited ammo. Worse yet, nothing seems to be arranged at all. I didn't get too far into the arrange mode, but it seems as though all of the items are still in the same places. I'm guessing that this arrange mode was erroneously put into the game, but hopefully the other versions of Resident Evil 2 have this fixed. Despite everything bad I've had to say about Resident Evil 2, I would still highly recommend this game. Again, something about it really appeals to me. The presentation is no doubt a high point, but there's also something really satisfying about mastering the controls too. This isn't too difficult of a game to wrap your head around, but it feels good to zip through it and discover new ways to make future runs faster. Of course, most of what I said also applies to several other Resident Evil games, so if you've played one of them and didn't find yourself liking it, then the series is probably not for you. On the other hand, if you do like them and you want even more, then you'll find quite a few games to keep you busy for a long time. On top of everything, I'd say Resident Evil 2 is an excellent place to start in the series. While Resident Evil 1 is definitely special in its own ways, I will say that it hasn't exactly aged well. But Resident Evil 2 is still a pretty good game that holds up well today. Thanks for watching my review on Resident Evil 2. Here's hoping that the remake turns out to be just as great, if not better.